guys. I'm going to be reading the passage of Scripture today. It's from Luke chapter 24. We're going to start in verse 13. It says, "Now that same day, two of them were going into a village called Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem. They were talking with each other about everything that had happened. As they talked and discussed these things with each other, Jesus himself came up and walked along with them. But they were kept from recognizing him. He asked, 'What are you discussing together as you walk along?' They stood still, their faces downcast. One of them, named Cleopas, asked him, 'Are you the only one visiting Jerusalem who does not know the things that have happened here in these days?' 'What things?' he asked. 'About Jesus of Nazareth,' they replied. 'He was a prophet, powerful in word and deed before God and all the people. The chief priests and our rulers handed him over to be sentenced to death, and they crucified him. But we had hoped that he was the one who was going to redeem Israel. And what is more, it is the third day since all this took place. In addition, some of our women amazed us. They went to the tomb early this morning, but didn't find his body. They came and told us they had seen a vision of angels who said he was alive. Then some of our companions went to the tomb and found it just as the women had said, but they did not see Jesus. He said to them, 'How foolish you are, and how slow to believe all the prophets have spoken. Did not the Messiah have to suffer these things, then enter into glory?' And beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he explained to them what was said in all the scriptures concerning himself. As they approached the village to which they were going, Jesus continued on as if they were going farther. But they urged him strongly, 'Stay with us, for it is nearly evening, the day is almost over.' So he went in to stay with them. When he was at the table with them, he took bread, gave thanks, broke it, and began to give it to them. Then their eyes were opened, and they recognized him, and he disappeared from their sight. They asked each other, 'Were not our hearts burning within us while he talked with us on the road and opened the scriptures to us?' They got up and returned at once to Jerusalem. There they found the 11 and those with him assembled together and saying, 'It is true, the Lord has risen and has appeared to Simon.' Then the two told what had happened on the way and how Jesus was recognized by them when he broke the bread."
Before we begin the special music, I just want to reiterate how excited we are to be here. Thank you guys for having us. And also, it's my birthday, and you guys have made it so great already. So thank you so much.
We're gathered in your name. Scripture today. Our story is one of 7 post-resurrection tales that occur in the Gospels. This one only occurs in the Gospel of Luke. It's 2 friends. They're leaving Jerusalem after what must have been a very long week. They're going home and they're talking on the way home about all that has happened to Jesus. They're going over and over it. It says they're talking. But the Greek translation of that for talk is not very strong. In fact, a different translation, a deeper one, is they were examining the evidence of everything that had happened to Jesus, of everything that had happened in the last week. They were going over and over and over it all, trying and hoping that it would make sense this time through. Suddenly, Jesus appears beside them. And the word reports that they were kept from recognizing him. It doesn't say that Jesus kept them from recognizing him. It says they were kept. And I'm wondering, what is it that could have kept these 2 people from seeing the one that they most certainly wanted to see more than anybody else in the world? I think that the clue may be in the text itself. You see, Jesus asks what they're talking about. And they respond kind of in shock, saying, "You don't know?" And they began to tell him everything that had happened to him. And then Cleopas says, "But we had hoped that he was going to be the one who was sent to redeem Israel." Are there any sadder words in any of the New Testament? We had hope. We don't hope anymore. Past tense. John Roller tells a story about a young lady named Virginia. Virginia was 19 years old and pregnant when she went to live with her 15th set of foster parents. Virginia's file read like a textbook case of neglect, abuse, and bureaucratic failure. She was moving in with this family that already had 3 young children in the house and was listening as the caseworker was talking to these parents and telling them, "Don't worry, this will just be a temporary assignment, a temporary location." Temporary was the story of Virginia's life. Finally, the mother said, "Virginia, are you afraid?" "Kinda," she replied, without really looking up. Then she said, "I've been in lots of homes." The mother said, "Well, let's just hope that this time it works out for the best." The way Virginia answered that is one of those responses that sticks to your soul. Without looking up, with no change in the tone or reflection of her voice, Virginia said this, It hurts too much to hope. It hurts too much to hope. I'm wondering about those two disciples on the road back home to Emmaus that day. Did it hurt too much to hope? The report of the empty tomb that the women had given. Did it hurt too much to hope? What the disciples had come back saying, well, it could have been anything. It could have been grave robbers, right? They clearly did not dare to believe the testimony about the empty tomb and what it could mean. And how does tender-hearted Jesus address these men with crushed hopes? You're going to have to forgive me for paraphrasing. He calls them idiots. I kind of love that, I'm sorry. He calls them fools. And he begins to explain to them the Scriptures. To go over it again. To explain who the Son of Man was and what he actually came to do. And as he talks, the Word says that their hearts burned within them. That they were experiencing holy heartburn. Their spirits were stirred. I imagine, at least in my weird imagination, these two men having the most crazy sense of deja vu. I know we should know this guy. I heard something like this before. Who could he be? But they just can't put it together. You want to know what finally does it? What finally helps them see him? Well, they arrive at the end of their journey. This man continues to go on as if he's got somewhere else to be. What's the end of the day? It was the practice of good, faithful Jews to practice hospitality. Not to let somebody walk on in the middle of the night, to give them a place to stay, to give them a meal. And so they hold on to him and say, don't go, stay with us. And they invite this stranger into the meal. When it comes time for the host of that dinner table, the host of that house, to take the bread and to give thanks and to break it. But the host doesn't get to do it. Jesus acts as the host. He lifts the bread. Does this sound familiar? And he thanked God for it, and he broke it. And when he broke the bread, scales fell from their eyes. When he broke the bread, they finally understood who this was. Their eyes were open. They finally saw that Jesus was risen, that all of their hope had not been in vain. Then, just when they saw him clearly, Jesus was gone. I've been going back and forth with this story for 2 weeks now. I just got to tell you, there's more in this story that I can preach in the next 15 minutes. So it's not going to happen, folks. I'm sorry. But a couple things jumped out and bit me as I was reading it. I'll share just a couple things with you. The first thing is this. Jesus does not reserve his post-resurrection appearances for people who believe. Jesus doesn't reserve his resurrection appearances for people who believe. He goes to Thomas, who doubts. He goes to disciples who are hiding in the upper room because they're afraid they're going to be found out and killed, just like Jesus was. He goes to these two disciples walking on the road to try to put their life back together again. I find it interesting that he keeps on showing up to people like this. That shouldn't surprise us though, right? After all, how many of us have in our lives met Jesus on the road of hopelessness? On the road of grief? How many of us have met Jesus when we had no answers, only questions? I gotta tell you, when I was working in Frankfurt, we had a big youth group and had a young lady in the youth group who was really great. Her family had gone there forever. Her dad used to be the preacher. Her grandpa, I suppose, used to be the preacher. Her mom worked on staff. Great girl. And she was dating a boy her senior year, a little bit before that. Nice kid. But he was kind of a rough kid. His name was Richard. Richard and this girl, their relationship kind of went downhill. I mean, high school relationships do that, right? And so eventually they broke up. And I got a phone call one day that when they had broken up, Richard tried to hurt himself. It was clearly a cry for help. Everybody knew it. And I got put for at least a day, a little bit of the next day too, on suicide watch. Richard and I met and really one-on-one for the first time. And we hung out and we ate buffalo wings and we played video games in my living room. And we talked about Jesus and we talked about what a life is worth. We got him help. We got him some time with a counselor, Christian counselor, and we went. I started meeting with Richard about once a week. Did this for a couple of months. Just checking in with him. Just asking how he was doing. Just one more person to make sure that he was putting his life back the place that it should be. I walked downstairs one afternoon when I was in the church office, and I walked downstairs to see some of our staff members, this young lady's mother in particular, crying. It's been about a week since I talked to Richard. And she looked up and she saw me and she said, "You haven't heard. Richard took his life." I cannot begin to describe to you the guilt. I can't begin to describe to you the frustration, the anger that raged through me about what a gigantic waste this was. I called that young lady and went and visited with her family. And I called this young man's brother, who was one of the only ones in the family who spoke English. And we talked. And tried to put it together in my head. I went to bed that night and I got a phone call at 5 in the morning the next morning from my dad. I knew it wasn't good news. Nobody gives good news at 5 o'clock, right? He was telling me that they had found my cousin Dana. She's 31. Her 8-year-old son found her dead because she had a heart attack. Let me tell you, the Lord and I had words. We had words about why things happened the way they happened, where God was when this was going down. We had words, friends, and they weren't kind words. I was angry. I grieved. Here's the thing, though. Here's the thing. Even in the midst of my grief, I knew God was there. I spent a lot of time that week going back and forth to visitations in Frankfurt, where we were living, and then in Flemingsburg, where my family was from. And the funerals were both the same day, the Tuesday. We went first to Richard's funeral. And I sat there and I tried to hold it together, stand strong for the kids around me. And I did okay. I did okay until I had to leave right after the funeral was over and drive 2 hours to Fleming County. And when I got in that car and I closed the door, the floodgates opened in me. I'm not a crier, but I don't know how in the world I made it safely in time for the funeral. Because I sobbed. I wept. I cried all the way there. I had to pull over the car at one point to mop up my face. Even in the midst of this, though, even in the midst of all that grief, I knew that God was there somewhere. In fact, looking back, I get to hear God whisper a lot. A nudge here, a nudge there. I'm kind of slow. He calls me an idiot too. But when I'm going through something like that, when I'm out of strength, it's then that I sense God's presence. When I'm forced to rely on the reserves of the Holy Spirit and not my own strength, not my own understanding, then I really hear God yell, not whisper. I don't think it's a coincidence that these two men, these two grieving disciples, meet Jesus on their road of grief. It's where he meets us still, right? The second thing that kind of jumped out and grabbed me and smacked me in the face was the fact that they don't recognize that it is Jesus until the very end of the story. And what is it? Aside from the bread, what is it? It takes them inviting the stranger in. It takes them embracing this stranger and saying, "No, don't go. Stay with us." I gotta tell you, friends, to be honest, we live in a world that doesn't practice hospitality anymore. We don't know our neighbors, not really. We don't share our business with those that we don't know and trust deeply, many of us. We insulate ourselves from one another. We fear the stranger. And we don't trust those that we don't have experience with. And all of this is really to our own detriment, right? What it leads to spiritually is for us failing to live in community that is, well, that it's what God intends it to be. What it leads to is for us failing to recognize Jesus when we see Him. Tony Campolo tells a great story about a large downtown church. They made the decision to open a food pantry and to open a kitchen to feed all of the homeless people and the hungry people in that area of town. And surely enough, they welcomed them in, and the people began to flood into that church. It's open every day to get food, to do what they need to do to survive. Well, surely enough, they serve breakfast every morning. Eventually, some of these homeless people started coming in to the service. If you can imagine, a very well-to-do, upper-middle-class church. And suddenly they're sitting next to people who, they might be talking to themselves. Most of them smelled bad. Sitting next to people that could be dangerous, right? Who weren't like us. And one of the elders of that church eventually kind of had enough. And he went and he spoke to the pastor. He says, "Pastor, shouldn't these people have a different service? Shouldn't these people have their own service where they can meet Jesus?" And the pastor kind of hid his response. And eventually he says, "Well, I think everybody deserves the chance to meet Jesus." He says, "Oh yeah, I agree. Of course, I want these people to meet Jesus too." And the pastor says, "No, I wasn't talking about them. I was talking about you. Everybody deserves a chance to meet Jesus." You know what happens when we embrace strangers? You want to know what happens when we open our hearts to those who are different, to those who are other? We recognize them. We recognize them for who they are. The beloved of God. The living, breathing Jesus Christ. Jesus, God wrapped in human flesh. Jesus, who promises that whatever we do for our brothers, our sisters, for the least of these, we do it for Him. The third thing that really got me, I'm out of time, but the third thing that really got me was this. How Jesus makes Himself known at the table. He's known in the breaking of the bread. There's a lot of preachers who get up and preach this morning that this is a communion story. And they're right. Because we understand who Jesus is when He's broken on the cross. Breaking His body, spilling His blood. We understand that He is the Son of God when He does that. But I don't think that's just what this story is about. You see, we serve a God. We serve a Christ who's known in the breaking. We serve a God who is not the overwhelming champion and a victor in the world. Jesus Christ, by all earthly means, didn't win. He was executed as a criminal. Jesus Christ, by all the measures we would use, didn't win. We don't serve a God who's the conquering, undefeated champion. He is the suffering servant who comes into glory with the scars still showing on His hands. We recognize Jesus Christ as the Son of God because of His suffering, not in spite of it. We recognize Him for who He is because those hurt places become all the proof we need that our God is the God who heals. Our God is the God who redeems. Our God is the God who resurrects our hope. Those scars, His and ours, are not a shame. They're a glory, friends. They're a glory. Last week we finished up the study we were doing. It was Renegade Gospel. It was really great. I enjoyed doing that with many of you. But one of the things that Slaughter said in the final video, he said, God does His best work in cemeteries. I love that. It stayed with me all week long. God does his best work in cemeteries. We serve the God who gains victory in our defeats, who chooses to renew us in our loss, who is made known in the breaking. Rob Bell tells the story of meeting with this counselor. And whenever he talks to this Christian counselor and describes something that he's done as a mistake, whenever he starts complaining about something that's going on right now or questioning something that God is doing, the counselor pulls a sign out of his bottom left-hand drawer. The sign has 5 words on it. The sign says, "The God who wastes nothing." The God who wastes nothing. The God we serve redeems us. He takes your hurts and he renews and heals them. The God we serve, he takes our mistakes and he reminds us that our mistakes matter a whole lot less than God's redemption. Friends, what that means is that there is no loss. There is no screw up. There's no mistake that you have made that's too big for our God to use, to redeem, to heal with. There's nothing too big that our God can't make new. All of this is good news to people like you and me. All of this is good news to people who are broken. It's good news to those of us who've found our hope in Jesus Christ after walking roads of disappointment and disillusionment. It's a job too, though, friends. And don't forget this, because when you and I finally get it, when we finally see God moving in our lives, when we finally see God for who he is right now, risen, resurrected. When we see that, we've got to do the same thing that these 2 disciples do. It's right in the middle of dinner. They didn't get to eat. The sun is going down. You don't travel at night in those day and times. They just got there after a long 7-mile hike. And when they see Jesus for who he is, they put their walking shoes back on and they go back to Jerusalem. Why? Because they have to tell the others, we have seen him. It's true. He is risen. My prayer for you today, friends, is that you will know the hope of the risen Christ. My prayer for you today is that not only will you see it, but you will run from this place telling all who will listen of the God who redeems your soul, the God who sets you on a new path. In the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. I invite the band to come forward and lead us in our closing song. They don't know that we learned the song last week. It's the first time we did it last week. When John sent me the song, I said, you know what? I think we need to add a new song to our agenda. What do you think, folks? I'm going to invite you to join us in our worship, to set up an altar in your heart, and to remember that the prayer rail is open as we sing.
You guys stand and worship with us?